Eliav Benjamin, the head of the Middle East Division at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and he will talk about other aspects of the Abraham Accords. Thank you for waiting, and we appreciate it very much. The floor is yours. The truth is, there's a lot to be said about the previous comments, especially including Tair, and I am following the very large shadow of the CEO of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the MFA, but I would like to make a few comments. If I may, I would like to talk about some of the things that were mentioned here by Tar and Tanya, and also Knesset member Alon Tal, because all of these remarks connect to this forward-looking discussion in terms of the normalization and Abraham agreements when we recap the previous year and look at the coming year. So first and foremost, I would like to deny the main point that the relations between us and the UAE, Bahrain, and Morocco, the security aspect is not the leading subject. The main issues are economic, civic, cultural, and social between the countries. Those are the issues that connect us. Those are the subjects that we are emphasizing, and also look at the scope of the agreements we've signed with each of those countries and what those agreements include. Not one of them talks about security or hardly mentions security. We're talking there mostly, well, first and foremost, and the CEO talked about permits, aviation, trade, the green corridor we signed today with the UAE and Bahrain, and that is to create the synergy and the connection between the peoples. I will also relate to the matter of security or strategic issues on a regional level when looking forward, but that's not the issue here. But when we're talking about climate, yes, that's one of the challenges, one of the subjects we've been working on in the past year. And it's ECO Peace as an organization is familiar with that. That is something that we are indeed emphasizing, and that is an issue of security for every single person on earth. And we are addressing it very well with our new partners. And the same is true on matters of gender. Tanya spoke about gender, about the place of women and the place of women in other societies in the diplomatic discourse. Just a month ago, there was a joint declaration in Geneva at the initiative of the 4 ambassadors led by our ambassador, a woman in Geneva, Elon Ben Shachar, together with the Emiratis and Bahrainis and Moroccans, that there should be a role for women in diplomacy and in peace processes around the world. So what better example of that can we find? We are placing these things up front, and that is the type of discourse and the type of things we have placed on the agenda when we look at the coming year or when we look to the future. I would like to go back, if I may, 2 or 3 minutes and to look at the past, because you can't look at the future without looking at the past too. And the achievements of the past year, yes, achievements, and we are indeed noting, marking, and celebrating these things. We are celebrating the first anniversary of our relations with UAE and Bahrain. In 2 months, we will celebrate the first anniversary of the upgrading of relations with Morocco. This is a year of building infrastructure. And that's important to understand. In the past year, we were engaged in the building of infrastructures in all the various areas, and a considerable part of that is the agreement infrastructure of G to G, governments to governments. And we signed 9 agreements with Morocco today, and with Bahrain 17 agreements so far, and UAE also 17 in a variety of areas. This is a year of business and investments. Just last week, there was a very, very significant event in the UAE of Bank Hapoalim and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the Manufacturing Institute. Senior leaders of Israel's economy were there in a demonstration of strength and cooperation that was huge between Israel and the UAE, with investments that we're already all seeing and hearing about that are taking shape. And what do we say here? Usually people say the sky is the limit where the relationship potential is concerned. But last year we signed a space agreement with the UAE. So we've actually gone beyond the sky. So these are just the seeds of what we are hoping to see. And in the context of space and cooperation, and the Arab sector in Israel, there's potential there too. And that is potential that we are tapping. One of the things we're doing is cooperation of space centers in Arab cities in Israel in collaborations with cities in UAE. And there is a lot going on this. And I hope that in January, during Israel's Space Week, we'll see signings of agreements in that area. And that's part of the beauty, as we see it, of these relations, because it's all inclusive. With these relations, we are presenting a new paradigm. We can relate to the Palestinian issue separately, but this is a new paradigm in terms of the discourse that the economic and social and cultural aspects are leading. And this is an opportunity to bring everyone into this event. And when I say everyone, that means tourism too. In the past year, we've seen more than 250,000 Israelis who visited the UAE. And after the signing of the agreement yesterday in the UAE, the Green Corridor Agreement that is supposed to go into effect on November 1st, we'll see many Emiratis coming here too, families and business people who want to come and experience Israel too. This is not my dreams. These are the Emiratis themselves who want to come here. That's part of the interaction between the peoples. And we need to say that this past year of the creation of infrastructures, we had quite a challenge in the middle. We had Operation Guardian of the Walls, and we managed to get through it in the entire expanse, including with Egypt and Jordan, of course, with the UAE and Bahrain and Morocco very well. And it was not an easy test. And we worked very hard on that to keep everyone inside. So the challenges were beyond the honeymoon, and we're just at the beginning. And if I'm looking at the next stages, our main interest right now is to deepen and expand the existing relations with the countries based on the relations, the agreements, the visits. We had 8 ministers from Israel visiting the UAE just in the past couple of months. Israel's foreign minister visited in Bahrain after their ministers visited here a few months ago. And in Morocco, we're going to start seeing more movement there too. So that is part of the deepening of the relations, but also their expansion on many different subjects that we are talking with them about. We saw the value of the three-way meeting in the trilateral meeting in Washington, and there it was decided on 2 working groups, that one that will work on the climate issues of water and energy. I put that under a broader umbrella of fighting climate change, and we have an obvious, very great shared regional interest in that. And Alon also mentioned that, Alon Tal, the MK, and the other working group is on the subject of tolerance, interreligious tolerance. And that's a very, very important working group, important to them and important to us, very important. And what we have here is a change in the paradigm, that it's not right and left or a struggle between religions. It's a struggle between extremists and moderates. And it's clear that we're on the same side, and we know who the good guys are and who the bad guys are. And that's why the potential here is so huge. And it's quite a challenge for the MFA to manage this whole event, because everybody wants a piece of the pie, and that's great. And that's what we're really working on. The idea, as we see it, is to contend with the most fundamental things, both on a bilateral level and on a regional level. And when we talk about security, security is not just Iran. It's Iran, of course it is, first and foremost, in terms of the personal security of every single one of us. But it's also food security and medical security and health security and climate security and water security and everything else. And that's exactly the discourse that we're holding with the Bahrainis and the Emiratis and the Moroccans. And thankfully, the Jordanians and the Egyptians, and yes, the Palestinians too, they get it. And our situation with those countries, the older countries that we've had peace agreements with, is very different now than it was before. Why? Thanks to the Abraham Accords, thanks to the change in the paradigm and the change in the discourse over the place at which we find ourselves. And if I look forward to what we are interested in, it may not be typical of diplomats in the MFA, but I look at it less cynically, genuinely, for the sake of people, our children, the world, of the desire we have to enlist support in the purest way possible. And if we have the Indians, who are a super central actor here that the CEO discussed in this expanse, that's a classic example. We want more. They need to understand that we are in a different kind of discourse. It's more yes than no, and how we can add all the different actors and different initiatives and place them in this cart. And when I look, perhaps the last item, or as I look to the future in the coming year, I think that the discourse needs to be different, and our challenge is to create more dividends that lead to genuine connections between people, so that ultimately the people in the region will benefit from these fruits, literally from these fruits, because we're exporting fruits and vegetables to the Gulf as well, but they'll also benefit from the contact with one another, with all the problems that will be on the way, and there will be problems. That's part of it. So that's perhaps a good sign, a positive note to end the day. And yes, there are challenges and we will contend with them. That's part of it. But we're in a completely different place now. And I think there will be surprises on the way and more achievements. Thank you.